For nearly 2 decades, Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban were the picture of lasting love, a couple who seemed to have conquered fame, distance, and every challenge together. But after their quiet separation and heartbreaking divorce in 2025, the mask of perfection finally slipped. Nicole, known for her grace and silence, began to open up in rare, honest moments about what truly went on behind closed doors. No scandals, no shouting, just truth. The woman who once protected her husband's struggles was done hiding behind the illusion. Now, Nicole is revealing the emotional weight she carried for years, showing the world that even Hollywood's brightest love stories can hide some of the darkest heartbreaks. Meeting and marriage beginnings. When Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban first met in 2005 at the Good Day USA Gala in Los Angeles, their encounter carried an air of fate more than chance. Both were at pivotal points in their lives, standing on opposite ends of success and heartbreak. Nicole, radiant in her post-Oscar glow from the hours, was still quietly recovering from the emotional wreckage of her marriage to Tom Cruise. A chapter marked by loss, loneliness, and the painful separation from her adopted children, Isabella and Connor. She had rebuilt her professional life, reclaiming her place as one of Hollywood's most respected actresses, yet privately, she carried a void, the yearning for family and stability. Keith, meanwhile, was a country star ascending in fame, but shadowed by his struggles with addiction. His songs, raw and confessional, reflected a man searching for redemption. When their paths crossed, it wasn't instant fireworks, but a gentle recognition of shared vulnerability. Two people who understood pain and longed for peace. Their relationship blossomed slowly, built not on glamour, but on empathy. By June 2006, they stood before friends and family in a candle-lit Sydney chapel, pledging love beneath a soft golden glow. Nicole's gown shimmered like a quiet promise. Keith's serenade moved guests to tears. That night it seemed as though love had finally rewarded two broken hearts. To the world, their union symbolized second chances, a fairy tale born from pain, proof that love could still conquer the scars of the past. Early challenges and public triumph. The illusion of perfection didn't take long to be tested. Just 4 months into their marriage, Keith Urban checked himself into rehab for alcohol addiction. For Nicole, it was a shock that cut deep. She had believed love could heal, but now she was thrust into a storm she hadn't seen coming. Yet instead of retreating, she chose compassion. She visited him during treatment, guarded his privacy fiercely, and refused to let the media exploit his vulnerability. This act of loyalty revealed her true nature, a woman determined to protect, not punish. The months that followed were difficult, filled with emotional strain and quiet endurance. But she stayed firm in her belief that the man she married could find his way back. Over time, Keith credited her with saving his life, often calling her his rock and grace in public speeches. Together, they welcomed 2 daughters, Sunday Rose in 2008 and Faith Margaret in 2010, bringing a new sense of joy and completeness to their world. From the outside, they looked unshakable. Hollywood adored them, the disciplined actress and the soulful musician who had beaten the odds. They posed for magazine covers, attended premieres arm in arm, and shared gentle affection that seemed genuine. But even as the world celebrated their love story, the cracks that had once appeared small began to deepen quietly beneath the surface. Their picture-perfect image hid the exhaustion of two people constantly trying to hold each other and themselves together. Cracks behind the red carpet. By the early 2000s, the shimmering glow surrounding their marriage began to dim, replaced by a subtle but growing distance. On red carpets, they still looked in sync, fingers intertwined, smiles radiant, but the connection that once felt effortless was now being rehearsed. Nicole's life revolved around structure and family. After losing her first family once before, She anchored herself in the stability of motherhood and home life in Nashville. She found comfort in routines, school runs, and quiet dinners. Keith, on the other hand, thrived in chaos, the rush of live shows, the noise of touring, and the seductive pull of the road. What had once been a complementary balance between discipline and spontaneity slowly turned into a source of conflict. She craved presence. He sought space. Her calls often went unanswered, while he drowned fatigue and emotion in the one thing he knew best: his music. The love that began as healing started to transform into performance, sustained by habit more than harmony. Nicole, ever gracious, kept the illusion alive in public, offering gentle smiles and reassuring answers when reporters asked about their marriage. But those close to her noticed the weariness behind her composure. What once felt like partnership now resembled endurance. The passion that once bonded them had been replaced by silence, and beneath the gloss of celebrity perfection, two hearts were quietly drifting further apart, maintaining the illusion. By the time their 10th anniversary arrived, Nicole and Keith had weathered storms that could have destroyed any couple: addiction, fame, distance, and the unforgiving glare of public attention. Yet they still projected the image of unity. They smiled for cameras, exchanged tender gestures at award shows, and spoke in interviews about mutual strength and devotion. But behind the practiced lines was a very different reality. Nicole, ever the caregiver, had spent years holding up the weight of a fragile marriage, believing that if she just loved hard enough, she could fix what was broken. Keith, however, was beginning to feel trapped by that narrative. The man who had been saved now wanted to stand on his own, free from constant scrutiny and expectations. Their relationship became a balancing act between two opposing forces: her longing for emotional security and his hunger for independence. Fame, instead of binding them together, magnified their differences. The more the world idealized their marriage, the more pressure they felt to maintain the act. In private, exhaustion took root. The smiles became less spontaneous, the laughter less real. Still, they held on, partly for love, partly for their family, and partly for the audience who believed in them. They had become symbols of endurance, and that image, once a source of pride, had turned into an invisible cage that neither of them could easily escape. Turning point. Divergent lives. By 2023, the illusion was beginning to fade entirely. The couple's lives had grown so separate that friends quietly began to wonder if they were living parallel existences. Nicole was often overseas for film projects like Practical Magic 2 in London, while Keith spent months on the road touring. The time apart wasn't just physical, it was emotional. Conversations grew shorter, calls became less frequent, and the comforting familiarity that once defined their bond was replaced by polite distance. The once vibrant partnership now felt more like an arrangement, one held together by habit and public expectation, rather than shared purpose. Their final public appearance together in June 2025 at a soccer match in Nashville confirmed what many already suspected. The couple appeared detached, exchanging polite smiles but little else. Not long after, Keith quietly moved his belongings out of their home, choosing solitude over confrontation. When Nicole returned from filming, she found silence where love once lived. It was a quiet end, without drama or blame, a man quietly stepping away, and a woman realizing she could no longer hold together what had already unraveled. The fairy tale that had begun in candlelight ended in shadows. For Nicole, it was a familiar heartbreak, but this time, she didn't chase or beg. She accepted the truth that sometimes love isn't destroyed by betrayal or anger. It simply fades, leaving behind only memories of what it once promised to be. The divorce filing and public shock. When Nicole Kidman officially filed for divorce on September 30th, 2025, it sent ripples through Hollywood. To the public, it seemed sudden, but those close to the couple knew the separation had been in motion for months. The divorce papers cited irreconcilable differences, a phrase simple in form but heavy in meaning, 19 years of love, struggle, and silence distilled into 2 words. Nicole requested primary custody of their daughters, Sunday Rose and Faith Margaret, with Keith granted visitation rights. She declined spousal or child support, a quiet statement that this was not about money or revenge, it was about stability and protection for her girls. Reports suggested Nicole had clung to hope even when the relationship had already dissolved in spirit. While Keith's decision to move out had marked his emotional exit, Nicole's filing marked her acceptance of the inevitable. The moment represented not just a legal end, but the emotional collapse of what had long been presented as one of Hollywood's most enduring marriages. Fans and friends alike were stunned, as the couple's image of loyalty and affection had seemed unshakable. Behind the composed exterior, however, Nicole was exhausted from years of trying to hold things together. Her filing was not impulsive. It was her final act of strength. It symbolized a woman's decision to stop protecting an illusion and start protecting her own peace. The news was less a scandal and more a heartbreak, the end of a story many believed would last forever. Emotional fallout and truths unveiled. In the aftermath of the filing, emotions ran deep and raw. Those close to Nicole described her as devastated but composed. She reportedly felt blindsided by how final Keith's departure had been, realizing he had emotionally checked out long before she was ready to give up. The sense of betrayal didn't come from infidelity or public scandal, but from silence. While she was fighting for their marriage, Keith had already made peace with its end. His actions after the divorce filing shocked many fans, appearing on stage without his wedding ring and changing lyrics in one of his well-known love songs, subtly reshaping them into something that sounded like a goodbye. It was a public signal that the fairy tale was officially over. Nicole, on the other hand, maintained her dignity. She didn't issue reactive statements or feed the rumor mill. Her quietness contrasted sharply with the sudden shift in Keith's stage persona. This moment captured the emotional split between them, her silence rooted in pain, his performance expressing unresolved frustration. Insiders noted that Nicole's hurt came not just from losing her partner, but from realizing the years of emotional investment had ended without closure. To the public, their divorce was just another Hollywood breakup, but for Nicole, it was the unraveling of nearly 2 decades of love and endurance. She had built her life around a man she believed in, and watching him rewrite their story in song was the hardest part of all. Nicole's self-reckoning and recovery. In the weeks following the split, Nicole began to emerge from the shadows of heartbreak into a period of reflection and healing. She granted only one major interview where her tone was quiet but revealing. She spoke about resilience, about surviving what she could not control and finding strength in her daughters and her work. Gone was the image of the endlessly forgiving wife who carried her husband's struggles on her back. In her place stood a woman rediscovering her identity outside the label of Keith Urban's wife. Friends described her as more grounded, more focused on her own well-being than she had been in years. She spent time in Nashville with her daughters, choosing not to escape the pain but to rebuild amid it. For Nicole, recovery wasn't about revenge or image management. It was about peace. The divorce became less a loss and more a turning point. For years, she had played the caretaker, the protector, the one who made excuses for absence and disappointment. Now she was learning to protect herself. Her interviews reflected self-awareness and maturity, showing a woman who has endured but not been defeated. She found solace in the ordinary, family dinners, walks with her children, quiet mornings free from pretense. In this rediscovery, she wasn't trying to erase the past, but to finally live beyond it. It was not a dramatic reinvention, but a soft, steady return to herself. What remains? After the illusion. When the glitter of the perfect couple faded, what remained was the truth of a human story. Two people who loved deeply but grew apart. The world lost an image of marital perfection, but Nicole gained something far more valuable: authenticity. She no longer had to perform happiness for cameras or hold up the illusion that love always conquers all. What endured after the heartbreak was her strength, grace, and the quiet wisdom that comes from survival. Her focus shifted entirely toward her daughters, ensuring their lives remained stable and full of love despite the public storm. She wasn't bitter or vindictive. She chose peace over spectacle. That choice itself was powerful. In Hollywood, where personal struggles are often magnified and exploited, Nicole's refusal to retaliate or reveal private details stood out as an act of dignity. Her story transformed from one of glamour and heartbreak to one of resilience and maturity. For those who admired her, the end of her marriage became a testament not to failure, but to courage. The courage to let go when holding on causes more pain. What remained after the illusion wasn't emptiness, but freedom. Nicole's journey showed that sometimes the end of a love story isn't a tragedy. It's a return to truth, a chance to start again with self-respect intact. Reflection. Did she make the right choice? Ultimately, Nicole Kidman's decision to walk away was one of quiet bravery. She had fought for her marriage with patience and loyalty, but there comes a point when love alone cannot sustain what's broken. Her choice was not an act of defeat, it was an act of survival. She chose to prioritize her emotional well-being and her daughter's stability over maintaining appearances. Walking away from a nearly 20-year marriage is never easy, especially one lived under constant public scrutiny. Yet Nicole managed to do so with grace. Instead of bitterness, she exuded acceptance, a sense that some endings are simply necessary for healing. Whether or not the world agrees, she reclaimed her narrative, deciding that her story would no longer be written by heartbreak or public expectation. In truth, there is no universal right choice in such situations, only the one that allows peace. For Nicole, that meant ending a relationship that had stopped nurturing her spirit. Keith may have left first, but she was the one who chose to close the chapter with dignity. Her journey reflects a universal truth. Love sometimes ends quietly, not in anger, but in understanding that letting go is an act of self-respect. In doing so, Nicole didn't lose. She evolved. Her decision reminds us that even in heartbreak, there can be beauty in finally choosing yourself. The end of a Hollywood dream. When Nicole Kidman filed for divorce from Keith Urban on September 30, 2025, the world gasped. Their marriage had been the definition of Hollywood stability for nearly 20 years. Yet behind the scenes, the couple had quietly drifted apart long before the papers were filed. The official reason, irreconcilable differences, barely hinted at the years of effort, forgiveness, and heartbreak that came before it. Nicole asked for primary custody of their two daughters, Sunday Rose and Faith Margaret, without any financial claims. It wasn't about money or power, it was about peace and protection. While Keith had already moved out, Nicole's filing was her final act of acceptance. It symbolized a woman exhausted by holding on to something that no longer held her back. The image of the perfect couple shattered, replaced by the reality of two people who had simply reached the end of their shared road. Fans were stunned. Friends saw it coming. What looked like sudden heartbreak was really the result of a slow, silent unraveling. The fairy tale didn't end with scandal. It ended with silence, showing that even the strongest love stories can fade when one person stops fighting. Pain behind the public silence. After the divorce announcement, the emotional fallout was deep. Nicole, according to those close to her, felt blindsided, not because of infidelity or betrayal, but because Keith had emotionally left long before she did. While she had been clinging to hope, He had already accepted the end. His actions spoke volumes, performing on stage without his wedding ring and altering lyrics in a song once dedicated to her. It was his public way of closing the book. Nicole's reaction was quieter, more restrained. She didn't respond to rumors or issue angry statements. Instead, her silence became her strength. It reflected heartbreak wrapped in grace. What hurt most wasn't the separation itself. It was realizing that the man she had stood by through addiction, fame, and recovery had chosen distance over dialogue. Yet even through that pain, Nicole remained composed for the sake of her daughters. Her dignity became a kind of quiet defiance, a refusal to let heartbreak define her. The public may have seen a calm woman walking through the storm, but behind that calmness was someone processing years of love, loss, and lessons learned the hard way. Rediscovery and resilience. As the months passed, Nicole began to rebuild, not just her life, but her sense of self. For years she had been the caretaker, the rescuer, the steadfast anchor in a relationship that demanded more of her than she realized. Now, she was learning what it meant to stand alone, not as part of Nicole and Keith, but simply as Nicole. In interviews, she spoke softly about survival, motherhood, and gratitude. Her focus shifted to her daughters, her work, and her peace. Gone were the days of red carpet perfection and scripted answers about marital bliss. Instead, she embraced authenticity. Friends described her as calm, reflective, even lighter. It wasn't that the pain had vanished, it was that she had learned to carry it differently. The woman who once protected everyone else was now protecting herself. This transformation wasn't dramatic. It was steady and grounded. She spent more time at home, enjoying small, ordinary moments that fame often steals. In that quiet space, Nicole found healing. Her story was no longer about a broken marriage. It was about the rebirth that can follow when a person finally chooses themselves. The power of letting go. When the illusion of forever ended, Nicole didn't crumble. She evolved. The world lost a perfect couple, but Nicole found something far more lasting: peace. What remained was not bitterness, but wisdom. She learned that loyalty, when unreturned, becomes a form of self-betrayal. Walking away was not giving up. It was waking up. She didn't need to defend herself or prove who was right or wrong. Her quiet strength spoke for her. The love story that once inspired millions became a reminder that even the most beautiful relationships can reach their natural end. And sometimes, that ending is the beginning of freedom. Nicole's journey shows that grace doesn't mean staying. Sometimes, it means knowing when to leave. Her decision was one of self-respect, not regret. She chose peace over performance, truth over illusion. In the end, she reminded the world and herself that strength isn't just surviving heartbreak, but growing through it. Nicole Kidman didn't lose her fairy tale. She reclaimed her reality. And in doing so, she became an even stronger version of herself. Proof that sometimes the most powerful love story is the one you have with your own resilience.